In today's video, we're going to be reviewing a NHL blockbuster trade that was close to happening but was ultimately rejected, involving the Toronto Maple Leafs making a big improvement on their blue line. We'll take a look at what actually ended up transpiring with all those players. Where are they now? And would the Leafs have been better off to actually execute this deal? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today I want to take a look back from a couple of years ago and take a look at a NHL trade that was pretty significant had it had gone down, but ended up ultimately being rejected by Kyle Dubas. This information is something that I've heard discussed on the Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick 32 Thoughts podcast. This is what, obviously, even their information is still considered rumors, but based on their knowledge of the situation, the Maple Leafs prior to the 2020 NHL season were in discussions with the Florida Panthers and were reportedly interested in acquiring right-shot defenseman Mackenzie Weegar. Now, of course, at that point, the Florida Panthers were making some changes. The Maple Leafs were looking to upgrade their blue line. Teams were, still, the Leafs, we know where they were a couple of years back. They've really been in a win-now mode the last few years, trying to get over that hump and get into the playoffs. And especially a few years ago, the focus really has been to improve the team's blue line. They had acquired Jake Muzzin earlier back in the second half of 2019, and now they were looking to make another upgrade on the right side. Of course, later that year they ended up signing TJ Brody as well, and then of course, adding Weegar to the mix would have been significant. You mentioned their top four defense would have been, combination of Riley Weegar, Muzzin Brody, or, they could go Riley Brody, Muzzin Weegar. Either way, those are your top 4D. I think it's fair to say, looking back even 2 years ago, or where they would be today, that their defense core definitely would have been better. Now, the requested compensation going to the Florida Panthers that they were looking for was Andreas Johnsson and Travis Dermott. Kyle Dubas ultimately decided that was too much asking price and rejected the deal, did not proceed with that. Now, of course, we know the future of Johnsson and Dermott was not long with the Maple Leafs after that proposed trade. Andreas Johnsson, in the not-too-distant future, ended up getting traded to the New Jersey Devils. And, of course, last year we saw Travis Dermott be traded to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, if you're looking back at what those trade returns actually were, I really think Kyle Dubas and the Maple Leafs would have been much better off to make the acquisition with Mackenzie Weegar, especially given the fact that Weegar's contract is, at least in my opinion, is pretty team-friendly. He's not making a ton of money. Now, of course, now he's entering the final year of that deal. It needs an extension. Of course, he's now with the Calgary Flames, and we'll see how things work out there. But at the end of the day, they could have had Weegar for the past few years, including the season coming up, at a pretty reasonable price, really reduced price compared to what he's going to make on his next contract. And their top four defense would have been significantly better, at least in my opinion. Of course, it's hard to look back and go with the what ifs and say for sure what would have happened. But of course, Justin Hall's role would have been greatly reduced, and maybe he would have been traded sooner. Hard to say. There's still some talk, and people believe that Hall likely will finish up with the Leafs this year, whether it be by staying the full season and his contract expires. I'm not sure that he'll be back next year, or it's quite possible he does get traded this year. But right now, they're a little bit thin on the right side of their blue line. Of course, they have Brody, who is technically a lefty but plays his weak side, and they don't have a lot of other right shot D besides Justin Hall, and of course you get the youngster Timothy Liljegren. So it's not the deepest spot on the roster by any means. So Hall's still around kind of on a necessity, as much as they would have liked to have upgraded. They don't want to downgrade and make the decor even weaker by having too many more left shot defensemen in the lineup. So, of course, like I said, it's hard looking back, but I really think this Weegar trade would have made sense. Andreas Johnsson ended up going to the New Jersey Devils, as we talked about. Of course, he's been there now for a couple seasons. The return on Johnsson was youngster Joey Anderson. He's still, a couple years later, has only played 6 NHL games. Now, he's had a pretty decent run in the American Hockey League. It's hard to say if he's going to make this team out of training camp this year. He'll certainly have a shot. But they've also brought in a lot of, between PTOs and short-term contracts, there's a lot of players, battling for those bottom 6 spots with the Leafs in training camp, some of which are, a variety of different types of players. At one point, they had a lot of, a much older group, you can say, but they still have guys like Clifford and Wayne Simmons there in the mix. They brought in Nicolas Aubé-Kubel. They have Zach Astor-Reese on a PTO. There's a variety of players, including Anderson. Of course, you got youngster Nick Robertson. I think Nick Robertson, probably for him to stick with the team, would have to be put into a top 6 role for him to succeed, and they very well will take that into consideration as well. But still, at the end of the day, Anderson at this point has yet to really make an NHL impact, and it's difficult to say with any certainty whether he will or he won't. But at this point, they're not probably missing Andreas Johnsson too much, but the thoughts of having Weegar over Anderson certainly, makes you want to go back and have a do-over here. Now, of course, Travis Dermott ended up, at that point in his career, too, I think his value was a little bit higher. He was still looked upon as an up-and-coming young prospect defenseman trying to find his way. Over time, he kind of had his opportunity to move up a few times in the lineup between 2020, 21, 22, and over time just didn't really grab the role. Looked like he wasn't quite ready for a top 4 minutes or top 4 responsibility, and ended up eventually kind of losing his value a little bit and getting traded to the Vancouver Canucks for a 3rd-round pick. So really, would you want to trade these guys for Joey Anderson and a 3rd-round pick, or would you want to trade these guys for Mackenzie Weegar on a very good contract, who's proven to be a real solid NHL right-shot defenseman who can play good at both ends of the ice, for the last few years? To me, it's an easy answer. You don't even have to think about it too much at all. The Weegar trade makes way more sense than it would now. Like I said, can you imagine between Riley Weegar, Muzzin Brody, however they want to line up the pairings as your top 4 defensemen? You still have Liljegren and Sandin. Like I said, Hall's role at that point back a few years ago was he kind of started to grow a little bit after they acquired Muzzin. He kind of paired with him for a while. That probably wouldn't have happened. Hall likely would have been moved sooner. Would they have made the Mark Giordano acquisition? That's hard to say, right? Of course, Giordano was acquired last year at the deadline, has since re-signed, will be sticking around. They may not have felt the need to do that. They could have kept maybe some of the future assets they gave up in that deal. Hard to say if that happens or not. If it did, then either way, their blue line would be that much deeper and stronger. Like you have Giordano on your 3rd pair with either Liljegren or Sandin, and the other one being your number 7 guy. So at that point, Hall is gone, and completely different looking blue line. I mean, the Mackenzie Weegar trade speculation out of the Florida Panthers organization really was kind of off and on over like a 2-year time period there, and really last year I think things kind of tamed down a bit because the Florida Panthers were having such a strong regular season. It was pretty well known that it was pretty unlikely that they're going to make any kind of subtractions going into the playoff run after such a strong regular season. I mean, they did make a few trades and there was a few minor subtractions, but nothing to the point like a guy like Weegar. Of course, then later this offseason, they pull off one of the biggest blockbuster trades we've seen in the past decade with the Calgary Flames, acquiring Matthew Tkachuk in exchange for Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau. Of course, Huberdeau's already re-upped with the Flames signing a new 8-year extension, some mega dollars, and Weegar right now has had contract negotiations on an extension, but nothing has been finalized and agreed to here as of yet. But rumor is that they're trying hard to get that done, and there's a good chance he could end up remaining in Calgary longer term. But at the very least, the Flames are, I'm sure, happy to at least get Huberdeau under contract, so it's not a complete waste, because it was a bit risky acquiring 2 pending unrestricted free agents without knowing that really there was any kind of certainty that either one would end up signing a contract extension. But like I said, the Panthers and their blue line, there was definitely lots of rumors the past couple of years of Weegar being available. But after the long run they had in the regular season last year, yes, early exit in the playoffs, I don't think anybody really seen a big trade coming, especially involving the guys that ended up going to the Calgary Flames. He very well could have been a Toronto Maple Leaf. And then, of course, if that trade would have actually taken place, would that Matthew Tkachuk trade actually ended up happening? I mean, I know the Panthers were willing to put Huberdeau in the deal, but they would have needed more than that to make it happen. And I know the Flames were quite excited and eager to get Weegar in part of that package. If he's not available, Do they have to put something else in there? Maybe the deal still gets done, but it certainly would look different. Would have been a different return for Calgary. Definitely would have been a different spin-off effect by any means. And it's just really hard to say, had that deal taken place, how it would have changed the future, not only for Toronto, but for Florida, as well as for the Calgary Flames as well, since they're all kind of now would have technically, theoretically been interconnected had all those deals ended up taking place. Would the Florida Panthers have had the season they had this year? Of course, with Uyghur's case too, we've seen the last two playoff runs, not last year, but the year before, where Aaron Ekblad was injured and out for such a long stretch. Uyghur's role became that much more important. Can you imagine if he wasn't there and Ekblad was out? It would have been an even more disastrous year for Florida at that point. Hard to say where Johnson and Dermott would have fit with Florida. Where would they be today? Would they still be there? Would the Panthers have been happy with their development in the last couple of years? So many questions, hard to say since it never actually took place, and it's all speculative on what could have been, so to speak. But an interesting trade that came close to happening, but like I said, ultimately rejected. Did Kyle Dubas make the right move, or should he have pulled the trigger and landed Mackenzie Weegar to be a Toronto Maple Leaf? And do you think the Maple Leafs playoffs results over the past couple of years could have been different had they executed this deal when they had the opportunity? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments, and we'll talk about it further. Of course, if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.